Welcome aboard the Atomic Locomotive, my friends. For today, we explore Fallout 4 and 76's Wild Train. Chugging right along, let's jump into the lore. This train engine was used to transport freight before the Great War for companies such as NH&M, New Hampshire and Massachusetts, and NAR, New Appalachian Railroad Company. Add to that the juicy little tidbit that the locomotive was occasionally automated like good old Thomas the Train Engine, and you've got, well, jinkies. Practically nothing. Oh well, guess we'll have to put on our detective hats and look for clues in our endeavor to build a smidgen of a backstory for this mighty engine that could. So what clues can we find, gang? Well, we are pretty sure that the engine is a locomotive, given the large boiler-like apparatus situated in front of the crew cabin, in conjunction with the driving wheel and driving rods that are consistent with said design. Second, we know companies love to brand their products. It's almost like they enjoy free advertising, making it seem quite likely that the orange and blue are the manufacturer's colors. The M9010 emblazoned on the flank of the locomotive is the third and final observable clue. So now that we have the magic number of clues conveniently, let's get crack-a-lackin' and solve this mystery. The first clue led me to look through the list of known companies in the Fallout universe and find those that are involved in the creation of atomic-based engines. Through this process, I was left pretty much with just mass fusion and Poseidon energy. Using the second clue of the brand colors of orange and blue, I arrived at the conclusion that mass fusion makes the most sense. The third clue is found printed on each and every rendition of this engine, leading me to believe this is a model number of some description. Finally, given the fact the lore states that the system can be fully autonomous, this leads me to believe that another company must have been involved. Either General Atomics, think Fallout 4's General Atomics Galleria, or Robco, think Fallout 76's Watoga City of the future. Both are fine answers in my opinion, but I'm going to go with General Atomics since the Galleria is present in the same game this train originally appears in. This leaves us with the mass fusion M9010 locomotive, with automation performed in coordination with General Atomics. A fine technical name to be sure, but not a very fun one to say. Thus I propose Thick Boy, in ode to the large Big Boy locomotive we will touch on later. Although, Mega Stuff was a strong runner-up for me, as this train looks like someone took a conventionally tall locomotive, cut it in half, and then shoved some unnecessary mechanical cream filling in between the two halves. So, that makes Mass Fusion M9010 Thick Boy in full. What do you think? Would you have solved the mystery differently? Make sure to let me know. Okay, now let's get down to brass stats, shall we? See what I did there? Old Thick Boy has a width of approximately 6 feet or 1.8 meters, a height of approximately 22 feet or 6.7 meters, and a length of approximately 65 feet or 19.8 meters, with the crew cabin taking up the rear 10 feet or 3 meters of the upper deck. Speaking of crew, it can be reasonably assumed that the non-automated versions would consist of one driver responsible for the running of the locomotive and one conductor who manages the train's cars and is more of a supervisor or inspector in nature. It can also be determined that he sports a 6-8-4 wheel layout, meaning there are 6 frontal guiding wheels to lead the 8 driving wheels that actually propel the train forward, and 4 trailing wheels to support the crew cabin's weight. The final nugget of known information is he is likely constructed out of non-ferrous metals in order to justify the usage of rivets all over his hide. Otherwise, I would expect Thick Boy to be welded. Now, I'd like to derive tonnage, giddy up buttercup power, and max speed using a pair of real-world examples. First up, I'd like to explore the US's real atomic locomotive. The X-12 was a concept-only design drafted in 1954 to determine the feasibility of such a nuclear steed. She would have been a 160-foot or 48.8 meter long 2-section engine, with the rear section sporting a steam-generating atomic reactor with a whopping 200-ton radiation shield, making up 55% of the engine's total 360 tons of weight. The X-12 was projected to have 7,000 horsepower and a purchase price of a whopping $1.2 million. For that many caps, 4 conventional engines could have been procured, leading thankfully to the abandonment of the concept. Before I move on to the next locomotive I'd like us to look at, I wanted to give an honorable mention to the proposal to add a nuclear power plant to the VC-22 Snow Freighter, or land train, that looks wild and could be seen as a mini version of the crawler from Fallout 3's Broken Steel DLC. Now let's get back on track, pun intended, by taking a look at the iconic Union Pacific Big Boy locomotive manufactured by American Locomotive Company, or ALCO, that began service in 1941. The Big Boy is one of, if not the largest steam locomotive to ever grace our non-irradiated, well, mostly Earth. She, or rather he, I suppose, given the name, featured a width of 11 feet, or 3.3 meters, a height of 16 feet, 4.9 meters, and a length of 72 feet, or 22 meters, on a hinged chassis with wheels configured in a 4-8-8-4 arrangement. Yes, that's right. He has 8 sets of driving wheels that provide 6,290 horsepower, capable of propelling Big Boy down the tracks at a max speed of 80 miles per hour, or 130 kilometers per hour. Now, let's try and do some rough back-of-the-envelope pseudo calculations to determine approximate weight, power, and speed. Thick Boy is around 60% of Big Boy by volume and half as long as the X12, with a likely much lower requirement for the radiation shielding. This leads me to believe he would weigh significantly less than each of the reference vehicles. Let's call him 200 tons. As for power, I'd expect Mass Fusion's nuclear reactor to fare significantly better than the state-of-the-art reactor in 1954. But given the limited number of driving wheels, I'll keep the bump mild and give him 7,500 buttercups. Finally, if 6,290 horses get 80 miles per hour in speed, then 7,500 should result in an approximate max speed of 95 miles per hour, or 152 kilometers per hour. Chugga chugga choo choo, y'all. It's time to take a look at some pros, some cons, and some interesting bits. The first pro I have is the Thick Boy looks wild, and is certainly one of those landmarks you see for the first time and go, what the fat man? More impressive though is even though it looks like you should need the Wild West perk to come across it, there is a shocking amount of detail that is consistent with function. For example, there is a possible location for a chimney and release valves to go along with the driving cylinder connected to the 2 driving wheels with a driving bar. It is also quite possible that there is a boiler contained in his upper mass. And I could easily see the painted blisters as water tanks that even appear to have gas cap-like devices. Did the modeler really need to go to this level of detail for an asset the sole survivor simply walks past in a couple of locations? No. Probably not, but I really respect it. Finally, I've got to give a bit of a call out to the world designers as well. There are clearly water towers present, albeit a little on the small side, at some of the stations, making the steam-powered bit a distinct possibility. Now for the cons that derail the Thick Boy a little bit. Although his configuration clearly should have 4 sets of driving wheels, the design only really has 2 sets of driving wheels, as the other 2 are not connected to the driving cylinder or to the other driving wheels. This is a pretty unnecessary reduction in efficiency that I'd have loved to see corrected. Secondly, the Thick Boy does seem to be unnecessarily thick, as I touched on earlier. Other than providing the vehicle an aesthetic punch, it only really hurts the design. I mean, think about trying to be the crew of one of these machines, if it isn't automated. How do you get on and off the thing? Is there a ramp in the crew cabin to extend to the trailing boxcar so you can walk across and use its ladder? Or do you just have to YOLO jump? And what if there's no boxcar? Does it have a rope ladder in there? What kind of waivers did these poor drivers and conductors have to sign? On a similar note, although there are steps built in the front of the vehicle, how is a normal-sized human supposed to get up to them? They are like 5 feet in the air. Finally, what's going on with that Brahmin catcher? Sure, it looks cool, but the whole purpose of such a thing is to deflect obstacles on the track out of the way, not literally catch them and drag them with you. Attention passengers, we are now pulling into interesting station. So, it is difficult to tell if this is really 100% the case or not, but there looks to be windows to the rear and sides of the crew cabin, and 2 oval windows in the front that could have possibly been used to access the catwalks found suspended on the Thick Boy's flank. Hey, do you think I'm right? Make sure to let me know in the comments. There is also oddly a small canopy constructed above those 2 hatches to provide shelter from the elements. Kinda strange, no? Then, in a final call out, I'd like to point out the hole cut in the substructure in the heel of the skate. Just why? Normally, I'd think such a thing would be a towing point or something, but this is a train. Just use the normal hookups. Okay, before I open the doors and conclude this journey, I gotta ask a simple question. Does anyone else want to see this thing hooked up to an equally ridiculous World War II style atom punk railgun? Because boy howdy, I do. Alright y'all, thanks for traveling with Spydingo Railways. I really appreciate it. Also, thanks so much for suggesting I do this video. This vehicle was far more interesting than I'd ever imagined. And hey, if you enjoyed the ride, please treat the like button like a Brahmin and plow full steam right ahead, right on through. As always, if you'd like to see more and I haven't yet earned your subscription, please consider subscribing. It really helps me out. Spydingo out.